All right, so welcome everyone. This is the Dream Unfinished YouTube channel, and I am joined today by two extraordinarily special guests that are very near and dear to my heart, not only as tremendous artists, but also as tremendous people. So joining me is Dashon Burton, bass-baritone extraordinaire, and Joel Bentley Thompson, composer extraordinaire, and we are here gathered today talking about James Emanuel. And there are actually probably a lot of you out in the world who don't know who he is, which is why really we're doing this project. James Emanuel was a quick summary of his bio, and in the description text to this, I will actually also include an interview that he did while he was still alive. But he was a really, I would say, important and tremendously talented poet who is entirely overlooked. Most of his books at this point are now out of print. But he was born in Nebraska, and he sort of trained at Northwestern University and was based in New York for some time. And one of the things that I would say he's better known for is he was really one of the first scholars to take Langston Hughes seriously. And it was through a lot of his writing on Hughes and that literary analysis that came a lot more of the sort of critical acclaim that followed. And Dark Symphony is his anthology of literary criticism of Black authors and writers. And I think that is actually one of the few books of his that is still in print. But he also left behind it a tremendous body of work in terms of poetry that ranged quite, extensively. There were things that were much more sort of in a familiar traditional form, such as sonnets. But then he also wrote quite a bit in free verse. And towards the end of his life, he was also pioneering some of his own sorts of models, such as these haiku-inspired jazz poems. And just a real range of topics. Unfortunately, a lot of folks sort of summarize him as saying he was a Black poet, when really, and yes, absolutely, he did write on some topics that were specific to the Black American experience, but really just a tremendous craftsman and a really important figure, and someone who we at the Dream Unfinished feel really strongly his legacy should continue to be revisited. And as it turns out, in a sort of bit of kismet, this week, June 15th or 16th, is his centennial. So he would have turned 100 this year. And so we are commissioning a setting of his poem, Love's a Crazy Scrapbook, to be composed by Joel and to be performed by Dashon. So with that, I would love for us for me to stop yapping and for us to just talk about this poem and talk about what sort of ideas, and to give folks an early glimpse of what it looks like to be composing a new piece, and also that kind of process of what it looks like to compose with a specific performer in mind. So I don't know, guys, where should we start?
Anywhere. I'd love to even just, is it possible to read the poem, or are
Please.
we
Yeah.
limited by any rights?
Okay. I'm sure that we are, but I think we should just do it.
Okay, we will read it, and then you'll edit it out if we need.
Yeah.
Love's a crazy scrapbook, necktie dangling on the chair, my wristwatch just beyond our reach, winding phosphorescent moments off the table edge that gleamed, the time of night we didn't care. Crazy scrapbook, sock and stocking on the rug, some smiling Arabs sold me in the rain, one black with hole beginning at toe, one beige with runs meandering to the thigh, their careless mates both lying on the deck, where notepad reading roses, don't forget, held down the smallest finger of your glove. Pages flutter on my mind, picture postcards of our days, of drift and sail, of cliffside wine and barefoot climb of grass to storied walls. High above some fall to guess and not believe, But pages dim and scatter, album all is gray to touch and chill to see, with sequence of our joys now shaken still, slow stopped, reverse, like hourglass sand, dripped back to cancel. Cover up those promises to soul-safe glitterings from dust of roads remembered, promises to keep cathedrals high, each precipice approachable as silence in our glances, our book mysterious in its plainest page. But love's a crazy scrapbook. Our sand is rising, blowing time, and tumbling pictures off the chain. Our album was, while we go bound, in thinnest paper of all, reading our legend on it. Reading our legend on ourselves, stamped on us, glittering high, in code approachable to memory, of episode as large as tale, of crumbs much more than loaf, of tatters warmer than a coat, of rinds and peelings lush as an orange, whole and bursting on the tree. Crazy scrapbook, somewhere near the end, the pages will not hold, they mix like shuffle at the bottom of a deck. Some maker with a cynic flair, made easy till we tried, and almost made it, almost made it. Scrapbook, scraps of what love were love at last. When finger on my neck was only little knot of tie, and pulsing at my hand, was only clock that ticked throughout all these nights. I didn't care, I said, I didn't care. Through somewhere, though somewhere, gloves and pantyhose might spread as clear as glass, you must be holding now to smooth your face of every sign we made our own. Oh, love's a crazy scrapbook when it's closed. 1974 and 1978. Tell me about the first time that you came across this poem.
I first came across this poem. So I should confess that I wish I was more of a poetry reader. My husband is a great reader of poems. As Joel knows, there's this, extensive collection of books in our basement with poetry taking a dominant presence there. And so I'm not, I think part of it is because I'm actually a very fast reader, and part of what I think doesn't sit well with me when reading or consuming poetry is my impatience. But for some reason, I think it's the and Joel, you and I talked about this a little bit, but with Emanuel's poems, like the impatience erodes and I think part of it is just how musical his poetry is. So I think it was really just my husband kind of handing over this anthology and saying like, here, and I was just kind of scrolling through. And I remember this poem really just took me off guard. And I can't remember if this was the very first time that I came across it or if I was revisiting it, but there was that like now near legendary phone call that I made to you, Dashon, where, I was like, this is, I may be revealing too much about myself, but I was like, I was like stressed for whatever reason. So it was like 5:30 in the morning and I was like weightlifting and I was like between sets weightlifting, and I happened to read this poem and it just so seared through me. And I think for some reason I also knew, because at that point this was obviously pre-COVID, so you were traveling a bunch still. And so for some reason I was like, I know that if I text Dashon, he'll be in a time zone where this will not be an imposition. And so I texted you the poem and I was like, isn't this amazing? And you're like, yes. And then we just started like talking on the phone, actually. Yeah, and I was also very impressed by your phone plan that we could do this. But we were just having this talk about this poem at this like very early hour. And I don't know, just every time I hear and read this poem, it's just like this rush of like regret really kind of flows through, because I think that is so much of what it to me is about, this like this beauty in the sort of ruin of a romance. So I know that the first time you encountered the poem, Dashon, was when I called you.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I got that same exact sense. I mean, just that there were so many layers of everything that love can be, and especially the destructive force that love can be. but just so tidy on in its exterior. And so I think I was especially moved by the sort of the sheer constancy of his writing, and I like that idea that there's this rush, but the musicality just comes from this complete kind of flow in the text that almost it just, for me, it doesn't stop until the very end, obviously, and it's almost yeah, just kind of one of those poems that just kind of, it's someone who's been talking for a really long time, and we're just dropping the needle in on this very conversation. The way it starts is so kind of before before you're able to hear the first words. And I love all of the kind of the ways that he plays with time. Because yeah, the more that you think about time and the more time that we have, the more that love really does have this presence that runs through everything. It's got this silver thread that just runs through everything that we do, the more time that we get. So it's these kinds of motifs definitely jump out at me, for sure.
Yeah, all of what you've said really resonates with me. I'm really curious now to see if any of this sort of philosophical teasing out of what this poem is about is actually in my little swatch that I've sent to you in the chat.
I love it, and I'm just looking at it now.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking about the poem in a musical space, and organizing it around that very distinctive title in the first line of the poem, Love's a Crazy Scrapbook. And so in my head, in this initial draft, this was written shortly after our first conversation, actually. And I haven't really revisited it much since, but I had the idea of using the scrapbook as a motif, almost like pictures at an exhibition, the sort of promenade theme that keeps coming back, because he mentions the scrapbook and then he looks at a page basically and goes back in time to a specific moment in the journey of love that he shared with his partner. And so this first one is probably somewhere near the beginning. It's obviously sort of in the heat of passion, the necktie on the chair, the wristwatch just beyond our reach. But the way he describes that moment, you can tell there's passion there, but he's talking about things that are on the floor, little things that they were wearing. But they have nothing to do with any sort of intimate activity. It's just things on the table, and the time of night we didn't care repeated multiple times. So I decided to sort of set it in a sort of sensual way. Yeah, and then sort of we didn't care, taking it back to the scrapbook, taking it back to the present. Yeah, so I actually played the piano part and recorded it a few minutes ago.
Good.
So I can send that in the chat too.
Yeah, or do you want to do a share screen and then you can just share it?
Oh,
yeah, let me do that. You
Sure.
are co-host. So hold on.
Okay.
Well, and I love that detail that you pointed out, Joel, while you're pulling that stuff up about like how, it is absolutely sensual imagery, but he does it through this like very prosaic collection of stuff.
Right.
But like that is one of the things that, and I feel like he does this throughout the poem actually. Like it's when you are in that rush of a new love or a romance, like your sense of time and your sense of attention shifts, and so you start to like these small minutia you linger on.
Right.
And it is like the details remembered in like the all the like the debris that kind of collects around you, you know.
Right.
But there is this great, and normally, like when you're not in love and you have this like stuff on the floor, like it's clutter, but because of the glow that you're in, like everything is imbued with this kind of like halo of importance, because the person that you're sharing that moment with was like part of the debris making. So
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Is that too small on your screens, or
That's
can you
okay.
see that?
yeah, that's fine.
All right. I guess I'll play the piano part. I imagine some upper voices there, but
Yes.
so then he goes into the next memory, which, you know, there's a sock and a stocking on the rug and all that stuff in the little note. But yeah, I just had this sort of like little lilting 12/8 sort of reminiscing feel. And then these sort of weird intervals to sort of, I don't know, the Love's a Crazy Scrapbook. I wanted to sort of capture the idiosyncratic way that he's using this metaphor. And then, I mean, right now, like my editing brain is on, and I'm thinking like it's a little square in the 4/4 section with, you know, necktie dangling on the chair. I might want to change measure 8 to 3/4 bar or something. So it's like necktie dangling on the chair, next measure, you know, instead of stretching it out. So that it doesn't all feel 4/4, but at the same time, I sort of did want that steady build up to We Didn't Care. And just like in measure 11, I want to sort of capture the, I don't know, the sort of breathless nature of the activity that he's probably engaged with in that memory. While talking about the glowing lights on his watch, you know, like I think that's what music can do. You could be talking about a watch, but there's sex happening in the background, you know, so like, and then like the moments off the table edge that gleamed, the time of night, you know, mentioning the time of night in reference to the the wristwatch, but also knowing that they're making noise at a specific time of night and they don't care. I think that's the magic of his poetry, and wanting to elide those two things that he's expressing in this passage. I might want to make it a little bit more rhapsodic rather than steady, is what my editing brain is saying. But you know, the idea, the general idea is there of sort of what I want to capture. I might try another swatch. I tend to, you know, write three things, three different ways of setting the text, and then choose which one fits my understanding of the piece best. But
what a gift this is to see this not just this process, but this this literal gift of notes on the page. What I absolutely love about it is that I feel like we're already on the same page about this timeless quality of it. Any piece, you know, for me that has this kind of, you know, what key is it in, what you know, with this D major that starts in first inversion, this kind of feeling like, yeah, this story has been told and told and told for generations, and we've been thinking about it before, and this is the moment where we enter the sort of listening phase, you know. But this conversation has been happening for a long time, and the idea that even the tempo marking of with nostalgia, that's, I mean, that's exactly it. You know, you sort of get caught up from a moment, you know, that is sort of quotidian and everyday, driving a car or something like that, and all of a sudden it just kind of, you know, it just enters. So I love that quality of it already. Of course, you know, this kind of rhapsodic idea, you know, that the rhythm is really playing with itself, and really playing against itself in the vocal line, and that you have all of this variation that you know, just kind of sets up these little microclimates of each little sort of 2 or 3 word phrase, you know, has its own little universe because it's been set so vastly against against the piano in that way. So I'm totally on board already. This is such a beautiful gift, you know, to kind of see that, and even if this doesn't, you know, become the swatch, I feel like we're already, you know, kind of getting into that same energy of just this truly timeless nature of the idea of love, and how, you know, it just kind of comes back when you least expect it.
Yeah. I think, you know, hearing you talk about this section, it might, now I'm sort of like, welcome to my brain. Now I'm fighting against the editor that was saying I should change that 3/2 or 3/4 measure, because maybe having the piano stay the same or stay in a box will allow greater freedom for the voice to actually communicate the I don't know, that rhapsodic feel. Basically playing against, if they're both playing against a regular rhythm, then it won't feel rhapsodic, it'll just feel messy. But when there's something there, like a standard there, then there's something for the voice to communicate on top of that. So I'll play with it. You know, I'm still probably going to keep that sort of throbbing offbeat thing, regardless of the and it's going to be in a simple time to contrast the compound that is the scrapbook theme. But yeah, I'm gonna play with that a little bit more. Yeah, and so, like my wristwatch, like having that rhythm, sort of having that idea stretch into the next harmony, to sort of feel the reach towards it. Yeah, I'm playing with this idea of, I'm wondering if I'm doing too much, you know, like I'm wondering if I'm telling the singer to, taking away a sort of creative power from the singer by setting things like phosphorescent this way. But I really want to hear the S in phosphorescent, you know. I think by notating it this way in measure 11, I can guarantee that happens. But I don't know. I think that's something that I would want to play with you, or, you know, play around with.
That's exactly the thing to do for an excellent composer, to say, I'm not sort of binding you here, but I'm just giving you permission to truly have this moment. And I'm going to write it down and allow you to complete the circle. But this is the moment that I truly want. For excellent score sort of notation, it isn't just about clarity. It isn't just about, you know, sort of what you can and can't dictate. You know, for I think for a flexible or curious performer.
Mhm.
It's really about that dialogue between what the composer, the moment that the composer is trying to share, and that interpretation of what that can mean from the singer. So yeah, so for me, notation never feels like a boundary,
Like a
especially with
box,
someone as
right?
brilliant for you, as brilliant as you. But
Oh,
but you know, it's kind of permission to go in this direction
yeah,
for the sake of this moment. Yeah.
yeah. If there are
I
any, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, if there are any sort of descriptive words that you would think would be helpful for anyone else sort of interpreting what this text as we are doing together, that would be really helpful. Because I want to make sure that I feel like we're on the same page right now. And so if we can figure out words that would help other singers perhaps do this in the future, just, you know, I want to be thinking about those things now so I can help anyone who wishes to perform
For
this.
me, any sort of quality, especially in a piece like this, any quality, but especially for singers, any quality that can also be used to describe the way that breath moves, I think is particularly interesting. So even, you know, something as simple as breathlessly, or you know, even something as, you know, kind of moderately sort of that can be applied to everything, like,
Yeah.
you know, still or something like this. But if you think of, you know, the way that a string player would see the instruction still, and, you know, and play a phrase that way, versus someone who has to use wind, you know, to kind of think of something in a still manner. Or, you know, obviously very esoteric, you know, kind of molecular, or, you know, something like this.
Yeah.
You know, you can really go off the deep end. But my favorite instructions are kind of also instructions that can be applied to the way that I breathe within a piece as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Thank you. Another thing too is that I'm really flexible on these rhythms right now.
Yeah.
I've sung it myself at the piano, and it's constantly changing. And this is, you know, I say let's play with it as we are exploring together, and see what fits. I don't really want it to be square. I like when things bleed over, but I don't want it to bleed over too much and have it be a thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping you will just be frank with me about when things are too much or too little, or, you know.
The only thing I will be frank with you about is requiring that you sing this while you're playing piano, because I want to hear it. I'm putting on my professional singer ears right now.
It's not gonna happen. You want to hear me croak like a frog on We Didn't Care? Are you kidding me?
It is literally the only reason I signed up for this. This is going on Facebook. This is going to all of your family. Everywhere.
No.
They're going to be reporting on this. No, we are in such a good space, and this is such it really is a gift to see the kind of first moments of this, and to kind of breathe in these same in this same way. So I'm thrilled with this. I'm absolutely thrilled with this. This is really beautiful.
Thanks.
Let me ask a practical question, because I remember when I shared that we were setting this particular poem with one of the board members of the Dream Unfinished. He had said, "Oh, you know, the poem is beautiful," but he also said, "Poem has a lot of words." And I know that you know, often when composers will set poetry, sometimes people will actually be quite liberal with not using all of the words, or sometimes adding repetitions to different phrases. But I think when Joel, you and I had last talked about this, you said that you were going to keep pretty true to the way that the poem already sort of sits. So I'm curious then, from your composing it, and also Dashon for your eventual singing of it, like when a piece of music has this much text, and obviously as we were all sort of waxing on earlier, the text has so much deep imagery that you don't want to get lost. Like, then how does that responsibility or burden of somehow projecting all of those words, how does that show up in the work that you both will be doing?
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I think one of my tendencies while composing is to make sure that every note, every decision has a reason. And I feel that James Emanuel has done the same thing. And so it's just my job of finding the reason for every word. And then when I find the reason for every word, then it's easier for me to find the reason for the note. I think on a large, like a broader level, the only reason I might make an edit is if I don't know, if I can't find a reason to include those words in the sort of emotional trajectory that I'm telling now that it's in music. If it's interfering with the overall shape of the experience, and only specifically works to inform a reader in that form and doesn't necessarily contribute to the musical experience of the words, then that's the only reason really I would maybe excise it. Or if Dashon says he doesn't like them, that's gonna the line. Yeah, I think that's sort of where my head is at. There are some things that I haven't yet deciphered, you know, in this poem. Like, why exactly is it included in this section? Is there some connection to a previous stanza that this word has that will allow me to understand why it's actually functioning in this stanza? But overall, I see the very asymmetrical way that he composes his stanzas as reflections of the emotions inherent within those stanzas. So while the sort of initial early stage love, sexual love of the first stanza it's quite short, there's this whole thing about picture postcards of our days and drift and stale and cliffside wine. I imagine a picnic over some sort of like cliff overlooking a bay or something, you know, like there's those can be set in such a way that capture the breeziness of that moment. It's a lot quicker. It might actually something like that's this long. Oh, you can't see it. Something that's really like this long on the page. The emotion might be one of breeziness and might actually be shorter than one of the short stanzas that's jam-packed with a lot of heavy emotion. And so I think those are some of the things that I keep in mind when I'm transferring something from the page to the stage, I guess. Yeah.
I think the just sort of my job would then be to just follow up on that, and kind of in the same way. We're always, from James all the way on, we are always just trying to sort of chase that moment, that representation of what that means. So James, of course, imagining his words in a written, sort of form. What does the reader think, or perhaps in a spoken format, and now we are here thinking, what is this, as you said, Joel, this emotional sort of arc of the entire piece. What are we meant to kind of fly through? And with almost any I think one of the joys of working with living composers is that you can really sort of rely on each other to bring that to the forefront. It's not just either of our jobs to sort of say, okay, this is what you're getting to the audience, but it's really for all of us to lean on each other and to say, this is the not only is this the highest artistic product that we can kind of come up with at this very moment, but this is the journey that we are on, and we invite you into that journey as well.
Right.
So it's regardless of the length of the text, that's always what's on my mind. And I mean, I am a hippie, though. I will tell the worst story of my entire life, because sometimes this can go too far. Short story, 30 seconds. I was at a modern art museum, and there was just a white panel on the wall, among all of the other all of the other exhibits, and my friend said, "This is just trash. Why, I could do this, the whole art thing, the whole modern art, kind of experience sometimes. I could do this. Why are they getting paid a lot of money?" And I said, "Just look at how beautiful it is. Just, let the entire experience wash over you. It's a glorious, beautiful moment." And it was at that moment that the video came on, and it just turned out to be, the screen for whatever video piece it was, and then we both were like, "Oh," but more so me, because really, I was the one going along with the flow. So yes, it is possible, to kind of over cram, text into a piece, but I think it's very, very rare, because again, with enough context, with enough love and admiration for the artistic process, everyone, is really just going through this in the same manner. So
Yeah. And also, I mean, I don't think any composer pretends that their setting of the piece is somehow the way that the piece should go. I feel like if I were to write this piece in 30 years, it would be markedly different. This is me setting it right now, with my understanding of love and relationships and, my short 32 years of life. And so, I think, it's going in with intention and saying, this is how I see it right now. This is how I experience these words right now. I think that's the best that we can do as artists.
Well, that was another question that I had for the both of you, as far as so, and for the folks who are tuning into this, we should, we're all like doing this with each other, but this is actually only the second time that this particular configuration of humans has ever gathered, and the second time that you two have been in a conversation. And so I can imagine there being sort of trade-offs on both sides of a composer working directly with the performer that they're composing for, because from what I've seen, and if I'm mischaracterizing, then tell me, but it seems like, because Joel, you are writing this for Dashon, like there is a bit of that North Star, where like you kind of have a sense of like what is your palette to work from. And then right. Dashon, similarly, you're able to then, work with Joel as far as like what isn't on the palette, and what that you're able to do with your voice, and also parts of your voice that I think, because people sort of have this fixed idea of like what a bass baritone sounds like, that there are parts of your voice that you don't really get to experiment and play with, that we're hopefully going to be seeing in this. But then I could also see the very delicate nature of you guys are still obviously getting to know each other, and like, there may be some moment where like one of you is like, that actually like, nah. And so like I'm just curious like how that. Whereas like if it is like you write the piece and then you sing it and then you're just kind of in your own silos, then like there's, professionally speaking, I guess there is some ease to that, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to do my job and he's going to do his job, and then that's what it's going to be. So I'm curious like how this process sort of sits with the sort of rapport that you both have when you're doing work like this.
I think there's an old quote that I think someone said. I'm trying to remember exactly how, and now you can sort of tell that I'm a terrible storyteller in real life. I believe it goes something like, I want the members of my group project to be my pallbearers at my funeral, so that they can let me down one last time. And so there is this sense, definitely, that you do kind of just want to do whatever you can do. You have your own system, you have your own setup. This is absolutely not the way that I can personally work. I think that we are very lucky to have music and art, obviously, that we stand upon and just peer out into the future. But to do that alone is just the greatest missed opportunity, in all of art. I would be remiss if I, ever, said that I can say, that certainly I've questioned, composers' decisions or something like this, but but really, I think, the more that I certainly get on in my age, and the more that, I start to work with, just really cherished human beings, and people who, for many different reasons aren't, kind of puffing out their chest in any single way. The more that I, just really enjoy that collaborative process. There are very, very few instances in which I say, well, that's just not possible, or that's just a terrible decision. It's really about what can we do with our brain trust to make the artistic experience as viable and as healthy as possible. So I rarely shy away from things, or I think that, especially in the hands of brilliant conductors, I'm sorry, composers, you have so much opportunity to play, and that's what I love about music in the first place, that it is play. And so how can we get to that space most efficiently? That's always the question, but how can we sort of just love and respect and thank all of the ideas that we're going to put on the shelf, maybe for next time, but still in this place of respect, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly what he said.
And also that if there is a piece or a part of the text that I don't like, then that's when you put it in 12 times in a row. I think that's clearly what you do, just as antagonistic as possible. And you just put your foot down and you say, this, my way or the highway.
And then an octave above.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Practically speaking, of course, there are all sorts of things that, wouldn't be fun for me to do or for the audience to listen to.
Right.
But that's so rare at our station. And this is why, why we do what we do, to really represent the best of what art can be in the hands of skilled artists, and solely for the purpose of pushing it forward, so that the next generation has it to do it for themselves and better. Speaking of which, but but always, we're always on the hunt for just making sure that everyone is well represented.
Yeah. I'm curious, for you, in your interpretation of the poem, either of you, if you can sense when it turns. I feel like I want to find that moment, and I'm looking for that moment, and the moment where, I don't know, the illusion of memory is sort of shattered at a specific moment. For me, it's like we tried and almost made it. Like he repeats that line again, just like we didn't care earlier. And then it's sort of like you're standing in the debris, like Ben said. He repeats "I didn't care" again twice in the following stanza. But earlier than that, it sort of starts turning. It starts turning towards, you can sort of feel the love transforming into this other thing. And he does it by talking about roads and cathedrals and and pieces of paper, describing the actual paper of this scrapbook that this metaphorical scrapbook he's assembled. I just as it's hard to find exactly where it turns, I sort of want the music to feel that same way. Like all of a sudden, there's this, I want to establish this sort of like mushy gushy thing at the beginning, and have it feel like, you sort of zone out, and all of a sudden, like, what just happened? I feel like that's how this poem feels to me. The love all of a sudden just drains. And then you're left with scraps, in that penultimate stanza. But I'd be curious if you all feel that it turns at the same spot, then that would be really helpful. Or if you find yourself standing in the ruins at a spot earlier than I do, I'd want to know that too. But it's all very specific to the poem. I don't know if this is for broadcast.
Yeah, I don't know. Certainly not for broadcasting. I have no brilliant ideas, but it's something that I think, just the sort of the form of the poetry itself, I know you can certainly make that turn kind of anywhere, but it is a really interesting question, kind of where is the apex of the emotional arc, and where, where do things, kind of, start to draw back into this space.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite spots is the stanza where he says, "Sand, tumbling, thinnest paper."
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like crumbs, tatters, rinds, peelings. And there's he's describing the turn without describing the turn. He's.
Well, and it's funny because I was actually going to say that I feel like the turn happens in that stanza, specifically with the signal of the word "but."
But, yeah.
Because like initially love's a crazy scrapbook, but love's a crazy scrapbook. And all of a sudden, in that earlier stanza, the imagery of the paper he initially uses as like all of the sort of like our book mysterious in its plainest page. Like what I see in the plainest is like that blank page and all the promise and potential of like of that next chapter where you're going to add your photos and like that sort of metaphor. But then all of a sudden in this stanza, but love's a crazy scrapbook, then the paper becomes where is it exactly? In thinnest paper of it all. Then all of a sudden the paper is not promise, but it shows how tender and how precious it is, and how really ephemeral it is. And all the imagery before in that prior stanza, the one I just love that line, "promises to keep cathedrals high." Like all of these things around these like large, bold gestures, but then all of a sudden in this "but" stanza, then it's the crumbs, and then it's the tatters, and then it's the rinds, rather than the full things that you had both thought you had. So that's where I actually see the turn sort of turning.
Happening, yeah.
And I remember actually, oh no, sorry, go ahead.
I like how he just takes off the loves and just says "crazy scrapbook," and then the next one he says "scrapbook." Motif is actually disintegrating.
Yeah. No, I hadn't noticed that before, but you're right, because it is like a conversation where it's like it starts with "love is a crazy scrapbook," but love's a crazy scrapbook, scrapbook. It's like this. Yeah.
So amazing. There's so much to dig in with this. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I mean, could we, because it just occurred to me, Joel, maybe the next time you have another swatch, like whether it's for the same stanza or the next section, like why don't we just do this every time there's another swatch, and then it's like this diary of well, it's like a diary of a piece being composed.
It's true. That's true.
I love that.
Yeah. It's scary though, being this vulnerable. These many times I have ideas and I'll write them down and I'll love them for a week, and then the next week I hate that. It didn't happen with this. Our conversation was more than a week ago, but I'm already like having the editor brain and trying to put that in the back so I can actually just get the music out. I might try and come up with some other swatches for this very same thing and see if there's another way of expressing it, because I like that challenge actually. I like how I feel afterwards, where I'm like, oh, there's more in there. There's always more, so I like that idea.
I also like the idea of vulnerability from the entire process. I think there are certainly tons of young musicians today who are feeling exactly like we are, because we're still young musicians, to be honest. But you know, there are a lot of people who aren't, you know, where we are, who need to hear us say this is why this is scary, or who need to see me, you know, fucking up a rhythm here and there, or you know, just like, because you know, it's really yeah, it is all a part of that process, and I would, yeah, but this could be a really cool little documentary kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm down.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. So then, well, why don't we triangulate on when you'll next be ready to share a swatch, Joel?
Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
You just let
Like,
me know,
I'm not going to be
certainly.
like
I
in
remember.
3 weeks.
Yeah,
you know?
Okay.
Let the process be the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
nice.
It's a
to
joy.
talk with both of you.
This poem is so rich,
You're-
so much to dive
Yeah.
into. So yeah.
Yeah,